Welcome back, everybody, to the Oscar Movie Marathon, where I watch a Best Picture winner every week and do a recap video every decade, starting from the 1970s to hopefully ending in the present day. This has been my New Year's resolution this year, and I'm still kicking, surprisingly. The decade we're going to be talking about in this video is full of steamy romances, big production, historical epics, and a ton of controversies. I'm talking about the pop-stige-filled decade of the 1990s. Let's get started. Cosmopolitans. All right. Whew. Let's get started. So, the 1990s, the word I kept bumping into online was pop-stige. Basically, popular prestige movies. Big productions, big actors, big sets, big scores, big. But it's also crowd-pleasing, and it won awards. It's that contrast that actually kind of gained a controversy with one of these movies, and that's why we have the unknown films winning every year to this day. Like, the 90s were so popular that movie people complained about it. That is incredibly ironic in today's standards, but that's what happened. The trends that I noticed besides the big sensationalized crowd-pleasing stories were romances, a lot of steamy, very sexy romances, a lot of sex scenes in these movies. Two of the best pictures actually take place in the modern day, which at this point and from now on is kind of rare. Silence of the Lambs and American Beauty. And the 90s, especially in 99, had a lot to say about the present social situation of working class cubicle life that I'll get into later. But yeah, the 90s had a lot to say about what was going on at the time, but mostly in the later part of the decade. The last thing that's pretty consistent with all of these winners is controversy, whether it's racism, transphobia, sexual predators, both in front and behind the cameras, being too popular to win. Like, every one of these movies has a controversy, except for the one about the worst people you can think of is the one with no controversy. So I think that's kind of funny. A lot of these movies are talking about current issues in the 90s that are still issues to this day in terms of like conversation. But the way these movies approach it, it's like 2 steps forward, 3 steps back. They get one aspect right, but in their approach to like figure it out, there's a side aspect that they get very wrong. And the legacy of these movies is more on the one they get wrong than the one they get on right. Some of the watches for this decade were harder in terms of watching without a modern day bias. That's kind of how dated some of these interpretations of minorities are. Case in point with the first winner from 1990 was Dances with Wolves. It's a Kevin Costner Western. Those are hit or miss. This one, I would say the first half, or first 2/3, are fantastic in this movie, especially when they're hunting buffalo. That whole sequence is a Remington painting come to life. It is gorgeous with great 90s editing, really cool practical effects, and fantastic just wide shots of it all happening. Yeah, like Costner uses really good depth in the cinematography. Like, there's something in the foreground and then there's something in the background. He has those layers that these days Denis Villeneuve uses expertly in Dune Part 2. Costner's kind of doing that same style in terms of the landscape is part of, like, it's a very painterly approach to it. Except in the color. The color's really monochrome in this movie, not very saturated, which is weird because he wants to show the beauty of the West. And it's not like grayscale, like it's not Saving Private Ryan, but it's very toned back. It doesn't commit to the colors of the West, which is an odd choice. I will say the horse and the dog, those are the best actors in the whole movie. Some of the acting is rough, but the horse and the dog, fantastic. Like I said about the controversy, 2 steps forward, so many indigenous actors have significant screen time to really flesh out their characters so they're not just a stereotype, except for the Pawnee Indians because they're the bad guys in the movie. It's more the Sioux Indians that are individuals, which is the amount of screen time they are given is significant. Like, I don't want to bash this movie for bad representation when like most of the main characters are indigenous. So most of the actors, the indigenous actors in this movie, were taught Lakota from a female linguist. And apparently there are different gendered forms of Lakota. So all the Sioux men in this movie are speaking the female version of Lakota. And it was so bad, apparently, that indigenous audiences were laughing at the movie. That's how bad it was. That's, again, kind of that we're trying to do representation in the 90s, and we're not doing it right. That takes a certain amount of homework that I guess Kevin Costner wasn't at that level to do in his career. I don't know. He was pretty young in this. What I am going to critique him on is it's a white savior narrative. The military man comes in, gives the guns to the Indians, and it's seen as this great celebration that he has brought the Western civilized war to these men of the fields. Like, it feels weird that they're celebrating him giving them guns. And it's not like, oh, this is so you can protect yourselves from the invading army. No. It's just so you can kill the Pawnee and that's it. It's once the army shows up, then it's the, oh no, westward expansion, we have to get you out. I can't spoil the ending. But when it comes to how Kevin Costner's character sides with the Sioux Indians and what he does to protect them is really just him saving himself and screwing them over. He gets away with it. He gets to learn their ways, learn their language, learn their customs, live with them, make friends with them. But once it's time to owe up to the consequences of who he is and how the West know about them, oh, he just gets to ride away. He just gets to ride into the sunset and they have to face the consequences. That's not intentional, but that is what the movie is accidentally showing. So again, 2 steps forward, 3 steps back. A lot of screen time for all the indigenous actors. They're speaking the wrong language, and Kevin Costner gets away scot-free while they die. Silence of the Lambs, 1991. This is the one that has probably the worst controversy out of all these movies, and I straight up don't have time to go into the deep dive. I'm just gonna mention it. This movie is used as transphobia propaganda. That is part of its legacy in the modern day. And again, it's based off of a book, and the movie tried to simplify it for a wide mass appeal audience, saying he only pretends to be a transsexual transvestite. He only pretends, he just thinks he is, but he's actually not. What? It gives the perfect image for transphobes to fear and attack the transgender community. Like, there is an image in this movie, like a screenshot that they use. And the lingo that this movie started is still used to this day in media. Like, I'm talking like Fox News. It's bad. Like, it's that contrast where it's like, why are we all celebrating how cool and sophisticated this guy is? But then the one that's used to accidentally represent a minority is not even a human. It's a monster. Like, it becomes a monster movie with this killer, but with this one, oh, it's a thriller. Ooh, he's her mentor. Ooh. So, it's ugly. Besides that, Silence of the Lambs is like a perfect movie. Like, the way it is filmed, the way it is edited, the way DP Tak Fujimoto and director Jonathan Demme do a masterclass in isolating Clarice with uncomfortable close-ups and framing the actors right into the camera. She's a woman in a man's world. All these men are killers, and all the other men are, upholders of the law. It's a bunch of badges and guns and dudes, but they don't see her as equal. And the way they filmed the men staring at her is so good that a lot of movies just copy what they were doing. Because of course you would. It's the perfect way to represent it. The controversy and the legacy aside, Anthony Hopkins just elevates this movie to that masterpiece level. Without him, it's a great movie. It's a fantastic movie. But with him, it's one of the greatest movies of all time. And then there's 1992, Unforgiven. I had not seen this movie before. I love Westerns, and I mostly like spaghetti Westerns. I'm a huge Clint Eastwood fan, and I love Dirty Harry and all those movies. I had never seen Unforgiven before, and I had never really watched an anti-Western, and it's clear why everyone says this movie started it concretely. There are some film movements that are like, oh, these 3 movies started it. It's like, oh, okay, I could see that. This movie started the anti-Western as a text. Like, it fully dissects and destroys every aspect of the Hollywood Western genre. It does that for the first 75% of the runtime, and then the last 15 minutes, it just becomes like a 70s horror, paranoia slasher film. When he reveals himself to be the person he used to be, and he commits back to being that monster that people have only heard about, that's when the movie's like, none of these people are heroes, not one. And it's so good how it evolves that premise. Aesthetically, a lot of guns misfire in all the shootouts. That's fun. Actual different types of guns used in the Civil War and in the West. The lawmen are as evil and criminal as the assassins. They are awful. Gene Hackman, besides Anthony Hopkins, Gene Hackman had the performance of the decade. He is so good. Oh, I love him. And all of his speeches, the Duck of Death, all the scenes he's in, where he's just goading people into trying to test him, because then he could have an excuse to just beat someone up. Because he's supposed to be the sheriff. He probably hates being the sheriff, other than the power it gives him. Such a good character that he really fleshes out in every line read. So good. The trio that we follow lacks a key ingredient to be a classic outlaw: the guts to kill, the eyes to shoot, and the youth to hang on. Because the young kid can't see anything. He's a terrible shot. Morgan Freeman has the shot, doesn't have the guts to kill. And then there's Clint Eastwood, who does have the guts to kill, but he's too old to really get the job done. So all 3 of them together would make the perfect Hollywood classic movie outlaw. But then divided, they can't do anything in the movie. It's hilarious how long it takes them to kill a kid because he did one thing wrong. It's just the frontier justice is fully explored in this movie, and I love every second of it. This is one of my favorite movies now. Seriously, it is that good. Next up is Schindler's List from 1993. Out of all these movies, this one was probably the most, of course it's gonna win the Oscar. And I think mostly it's not just because Spielberg, it is mostly because of, I'm gonna butcher this name, Janusz Kaminski's cinematography. The way this film is shot to be an exploitation horror. It's not just a historical epic, it's not a historical romance piece that the 80s did for way too long. This film is looking into the eyes of evil, and it is filmed that way. It is a horror movie. Horror movies never win Oscars. They never do. Hereditary, The Lighthouse, all those amazing performances, amazing well-shot movies, well-written movies, they never win Oscars. The Academy sees the horror genre as beneath them. And then we have this that just breaks through all of those obstacles. This is a horror movie. It is bone-chilling, some of the imagery that they find from archive pictures. They recreate a lot of pictures from concentration camps in the cinematography. And Michael Kahn's editing, in the first hour especially, there's a lot of montage of bookkeeping, or how people dress, or people getting kicked out of apartments and Oskar Schindler moving in. It's the way the movie flows. It's kind of broken into 3 parts. That first part, for me, is my favorite because it's showing the rise of Oskar Schindler and how he just stomps on every downtrodden Jewish family in the city to get to the top. He does not care, and the way Janusz Kaminski and Michael Kahn show it is masterful. It's exploitation horror. It's all about the grisliest images, and especially in regards to the human body. Women's faces screaming. There's a lot of women screaming in this, and they get right up close to it. All the performances of these women are fantastic because they scare you. Like, you feel their terror. And it's mostly in them screaming, but it's also just how close the camera gets up to them and lingers on their pain. That's the exploitation of it. And just the evil incarnate slaughtering innocents. They're powerless to stop this evil. They just have to watch as it happens in front of them, and just the dread that is through the entire movie. The one part of this movie that I do not like is the grotesque use of nudity. He does a weird use of nudity, especially the female body, that is not necessary. It's kind of part of the grotesque exploitation of the horror, like when they strip all the women for the showers, or they strip them for the physical exams. It's like, okay, fine. But then there's like 1 or 2, maybe even 3 sex scenes that Oskar Schindler has with the random woman, and it's like, what are we doing here? I'm not the biggest fan of nudity on film. It takes me out of it because now I don't see a character. I see an actress surrounded by 20 male crew members. It takes me out. And especially in some movies like this, where it's like half of the nudity makes sense because of the historical, they can't be more vulnerable. Like, they're getting the clothes ripped off of their back. Of course, you're gonna have to film it in that way for the horror genre as well. But then there are other times where it's like, we didn't need that. What are we doing? We didn't need that. This movie's 3 hours long. Why are we spending so much time on this? It makes me feel gross, and not in the way Spielberg wants me to feel gross. It's a different discomfort, and I'm not a fan of it. Next up is Forrest Gump from 1994. Everyone's favorite movie from middle school. The 2 best scenes are Forrest finally deciding to do something during the Vietnam ambush and running back to get Bubba. That's like the first time he actually does something that he wants to do. This whole movie is just people telling him to do things. That's like the first scene where he's like, you were telling me to stay? No, I'm going back to get Bubba. I felt his character finally. He has agency. And then, of course, he saves everybody. It's a great scene. And then the second scene is, this is just really good in terms of Tom Hanks' performance, but Forrest realizing he has a son and immediately worries if his son is like him. Like when Jenny tells him that the kid is his, like, he's not happy. He's like, oh no, I've made a mistake, because that kid is going to live through all the stuff I've lived through my entire life. Once he finds out that, oh, he's the smartest in his class, that it's the combination of dread, sadness, like he's reliving his entire life and hoping it doesn't happen to the kid, and then just the relief that the kid is going to live a normal life. That is why Tom Hanks won that Oscar. It is a fantastic scene. Besides those 2 moments, this movie is just a highlight reel of American history. Fantastic. It's part of that crowd pleasing. We're gonna show the highlight reels. We're not gonna say anything about him. We're gonna say nothing about him. He's just gonna be there, and that's it. They cut out his speech for the Vets for Peace. He just got back from Vietnam. He saw all of his buddies die. And then, he's in DC and they shove him in front of a mic and it's like, what do you think about the war? And he talks, and then of course the cop unplugs the mic, and yeah. Apparently they had a speech written that they took out. They just took it out because that would piss people off. That is stupid. And that was your one chance to be like, maybe this character stands for something besides love. Of course, he stands for love. That's the whole point of the movie. But maybe he stands for what America has done to its people. And just, no. They're like, nah, we're not gonna risk it. Screw you. I'm watching this whole movie, and I know people cry because the loved one dies at the end. That's a cheap shot. Of course we're gonna cry, because he's in love with her, and we see that, so we're gonna cry. But about like American history, this movie kind of makes it a joke. And there are a lot of times where the movie could be serious, and it goes for a joke instead. I think it's really frustrating. The one shot of Lieutenant Dan at New Year's just being miserable, thank you. I needed more of that. You're going through like 30-ish years of US history. Say more things about it. We're spending all this time on how great his life has been. But it's like, no, his life is not great. His life is not. And neither is Lieutenant Dan's. Oh, but by the end, they're better for it. It rubs me the wrong way because everyone is a cartoon character. Except for Lieutenant Dan. Like, of course, Forrest Gump is a cartoon character. Like, he's almost Looney Tunes level of cartoon character. And Jenny is just like a punching bag for the director. Because it's like, well, Forrest is doing all these great things, so we have to show her doing all the bad stuff like drugs. In terms of the bad parts of history, that's for Jenny. All the good parts is for Forrest, like playing ping pong against the communists. It's very frustrating in how flat it feels. It's just a highlight reel with cartoon characters pretending to make a difference in history. Next up is Braveheart from 1995. The most popcorn Best Picture I've ever seen, and that is saying something from this decade of movies. It is notorious for its historical inaccuracies. Nothing on screen is accurate. Nothing happens the way it does in this movie. You have to watch it as a fantasy. It is not historical fiction. It is a fantasy movie. William Wallace is Aragorn. The British are, well, the British can still be the British. But, you know, it's like, it's not real people. It's a fun watch. The battle sequences are great. There's a lot of great visual gags in it. I think the characters are pretty consistent, except William Wallace starting this whole rebellion because they kill his wife. And then, I don't know, 2 years later, he starts hooking up with this princess that he's met twice. What the heck? And he's like, oh, you know, I think about her every night. Like, she's haunting his dreams. He sees her when he's about to get executed. Like, he loves her to his last dying breath because he had a crush on her when he was a kid. You know, whatever. What is up with this princess thing? My theory is, again, it is a fantasy sword fighting movie. Knights butting heads with blue painted Scottish Highlanders. You need a romance. And it's like they pull a John Wick where it's like, well, we killed the dog at the beginning of the movie. Like, we kill his wife. But we still need romance for the rest of the movie. So that's what The Princess is. That's like the, you know, the book cover romance novels like Outlander, like A Court of Thorn and Roses, you know, random love triangles in Lord of the Rings movies, you know. It's that romance to, like, again, crowd pleasing. We need as many seats filled in the theater. Oh, if we add a love triangle, it'll bring the women to go see it. Like, it feels like that. It feels like a studio note. Yeah, this guy loves his dead wife, and everything he does is in revenge for her murder. Can he at least have sex with the princess, please? And actually, the next heir to the throne is actually his son. Stuff like that. It's like, no, what are we doing? You have to watch it as a fantasy. It's a huge character assassination. Like, why is that a romance there? It's a studio note to get people to go to the movie. Braveheart is a fun watch with some weird, you know, studio 90s cheese and romance and whatever. 1996's The English Patient is just a flashback to the 80s. It is a historical, romantic epic. I hated this movie.
I can't do this anymore. I can't. It's too long. Quit telling your stupid story about the stupid desert and just die already. die!
It's out of Africa, but in the Sahara Desert. Out of Africa at least had something to say other than, ooh, war is bad. Out of Africa had comments on extinction, imperialism, all that stuff. English Patient is, oh, didn't World War II suck because different countries fought each other and you had to ally yourself to your nationality? We just couldn't work together in the desert to find pictures of people swimming in the desert. It doesn't sell me on why it sucks for these people. They're elites in the desert digging artifacts. Like, at least in Schindler's List, World War II sucked because these people almost got eradicated. This movie's about a rich Hungarian guy that sleeps with another dude's wife. That's what this movie is. And not only is it one love story, it's two, maybe even three, because we're in two different time periods that we keep jumping back and forth. Visually, very well shot. With like the World War II romance, the bomb guy like swings the girl up on like the rope with a candle to look at the paintings in the church. Fantastic, beautiful, love it. Why is that in the English Patient movie? She's like his nurse. The whole movie is all subplots. I don't know what the main plot is. Is the main plot discovering who the English Patient is? Once the credits rolled, I didn't know his name. I thought like the name was gonna be important, and apparently he's Hungarian. They don't really spend a lot of time on that until the end when it's important. It just, blah. It's a World War II period piece, historical, epic, melodrama. Again, it's a flashback to the 80s. It checks off all the boxes for Oscar bait and nothing more. All right, we're back to the good movies because now we're at 1997's Titanic. A lot of people call this the pop-stige, popular prestige film. An artsy film built for mass public appeal. And for Titanic, mass public appeal. The best comparison I can think of in modern day is Top Gun Maverick. Everyone went to see Top Gun Maverick, and not just because it's a fun sequel to an 80s movie. It's because it was a damn well-made movie. Titanic does its job. James Cameron knows exactly what he's doing. The miniatures, the VFX, groundbreaking stuff. Besides Lord of the Rings and Titanic, Best Picture winners do not have this level of technical achievements. This movie won everything. Amazing technical work, visual style. The romance scenes still work to this day. The romance scenes are fantastic. The drawing, the car, she's about to jump off the back of the boat, they're in the front of the boat. Great stuff. The chemistry between DiCaprio and Kate Winslet is fantastic. She earns her star power in this movie, and DiCaprio earned it as well. He kind of was already on the trajectory, and this one kind of launched him. Kate Winslet came out of nowhere and won the hearts of all of America. Nice. They play it as authentic as they can. There's no cheesiness, there's no irony. They're playing it straight. They're like, no, this is the romance of the century. We're not gonna make fun of it. It is what it is, and we're gonna make it what it is. The last like 45 minutes are probably my personal favorite because I love shipwrecks and I love nautical history. The actual sinking of the Titanic is fantastic. Every shot still works. Like the back of the ship with the propellers smashing onto all the castaways in the life jackets, the miniatures, like the cabins filling up, all the plates falling onto the ground and the furniture kind of hitting the walls and everything. It's so well done. And the boats splitting, and the Irish are locked down in the gate. They can't get to the boats. The shipbuilder's like, wait, that lifeboat is half full. Why are you half filling the lifeboats? We're still full up here. Like, what are you doing, guys? All the logistics of getting everyone off the boat. Very well done. I really like that. I wanted that to be the whole movie. Like, the romance is great. I like the romance. I wanted more about the crew and the hubris of building the unsinkable greatest ship of all time, only for it to just ram into an iceberg on its maiden voyage. There's so much sensational history there itself. It's not just a romance movie. It's one of the best 90s disaster movies that I've seen. Think of Independence Day, The Day After Tomorrow, 2012. Like Roland Emmerich movies, James Cameron kind of just beat him at his own game. You don't get better than this in terms of disaster movies. Because sometimes when the whole world is at stake, it's like, okay, the whole world. But when this, it's like the ship is the world. And if that ship is underwater, all these people are going to die. And then it happens. And it's like, oh, holy cow, how are these people going to get in the boats? It's the perfect scale for a disaster movie. There are like 2,000 plus people on this boat. But it's the right number where, okay, a lot of people are going to die. I just want the people I care about to be okay. And that's why all the VFX and all the miniatures are so important. It's to show that scale, to make you feel every moment. I don't like the frame story of the modern day treasure hunters and the old woman talking to them. There is the diagram of the guy on the ship showing how the Titanic hit the iceberg. It's a 3D model that shows all the cabins filling and then it splits, and he's like, oh, and this is the theory of how it sank. Having that in the first 10 minutes, they tell you what happens on the Titanic before we even get to the Titanic. That is smart. I fully agree with James Cameron on being like, we have to tell people how, why, and when it happened, so that once we go back to it, we don't have anyone asking questions. They're swept up in the story. They don't want to be like, why is the ship splitting in half now? What the heck is that? What are these? What's going on? Why is there an iceberg? Like, once they're swept in the story, they need to know what is about to happen. So then it's that ticking clock. And then once they see the iceberg and it's like, we're about to steer clear, and it's like, oh, we think we're going to get away with it. No, you can't change history. That's the best part of that present day frame story, is showing, look, this is what happened. Now we're going to go back and we're going to show you why you should care about that. I like that. But with the diamond and the jerk fiance and his Alfred with like the engraved pistol, I'm not a fan. I don't like it. 1998's Shakespeare in Love. Again, the controversy of Miramax. This is one of the first Miramax films that won its full Oscar campaign, and it beat out Saving Private Ryan. This is like one of the historical Oscar snubs in history, yada, yada, yada. Why do people care? The main guy at Miramax was Harvey Weinstein. He knew how to campaign his movies to win Oscars. And then he used that to kind of gain personal power and then coerce actresses into sleeping with him so that he would win them Oscars. And then he did. He was a very powerful, disgusting, evil man. And it all started with Shakespeare in Love beating out Saving Private Ryan. Everyone thought Saving Private Ryan was gonna sweep. And then this movie won 7 Oscars. Judi Dench won supporting actress, and she's in it for like 5 minutes. The set design and the costuming, absolutely. It feels like we are in Shakespearean times. The Globe Theater looks wonderful. Those deserve the Oscars. So, okay, back to the movie. It's a really fun movie. Like, I do recommend, out of all the Best Picture winners you've never seen, this one is definitely worth watching because it's Shakespeare while writing Romeo and Juliet, living through a Shakespeare play. There's love triangles, there's dressing up as women, there's balcony scenes, there's sword fights. He lives through a Shakespeare play. It's amazing. It's very well written, and it's not like, oh yeah, well, half the dialogue is just Shakespeare quotes. It is. But the way they interweave all the different Shakespeare quirks and they play it as just part of who he is really well done. I do like it. And then there's the priest condemning going to the plays, and he just shouts out, "A plague upon both your houses." And he's walking past and he hears it and he's like, "Oh, I'm gonna write that down. I'm saving that for later." And then he uses it in the movie. It's so good. I love it. How they use Gwyneth Paltrow in this movie, which, first off, Gwyneth Paltrow can act? I didn't know that. This is coming from like post Iron Man goop Gwyneth Paltrow. That's the Gwyneth Paltrow I know. So the fact that this is how she started, man, I wish she kept doing this. I don't know. I need to watch Marie Antoinette. I know. Yeah, I mean, the performances are great. The writing is fantastic. Ben Affleck is just doing Ben Affleck, and I love it. It works. I mean, it doesn't work, but it's funny enough that it works. It's just a really fun watch. Is it an Oscar movie? No. But it's a fun watch that really surprised me. Last movie, which I haven't even drank most of this because I made it wrong, but okay. So again, controversies. 1999's American Beauty. American Beauty is part of the 1999 cubicle suburban malaise movie. Office Space, Fight Club, American Beauty, and The Matrix. And I would say watch the other movies instead of this one. It's a hard movie to talk about because on the one hand, it's that icky, sticky, grunge, rebellion, oh, life sucks kind of movie. That is a certain flavor that people like, and it does it very well. And I did used to like that in high school. Like, this is a great movie to watch when you're in high school. And then on the other hand is Kevin Spacey. The whole movie is about gross people doing gross things. Kevin Spacey is an adult man that does nothing with his life, who then falls in love with his daughter's best friend, who is in high school. The movie is not promoting that as a good thing. The movie is showing him as a pathetic old man, even though it gives him a sexual awakening and that he finds agency again in his life. So the movie is not promoting who he is. It's not. But it is a movie heavily focused on the male gaze. Every dream sequence in this movie, with like the rose petals and all that stuff, is just the definition of like male gaze, where the women in your life are objects for you to do whatever you want. Ew. Again, the movie's not like promoting that, but the way they film it, they kind of do. Like, they're not saying it, but they're showing it. Again, back to that. 2 steps forward, 3 steps back. This movie does well with like, their neighbors are 2 gay men, and that's okay. I mean, I'm sure in the 90s that was a big deal, because in the 80s, I don't really think you could do that. In the 70s, maybe, but only in New York, you know? Because they're in the suburbs. We're supposed to be away from that. And the movie does talk about that. It's not half-assing that conversation. It is fully addressing how homophobic Republican, like alt-right conservative men and their relationship with homosexuality. It is fully addressing that in 1999. 2 steps forward. Fantastic. You don't be like, oh, he just hates them because he hates them. No, there's something going on with that character. And then the 3 steps back with how they film the way Kevin Spacey sees this girl. Cinematographer Conrad L. Hall. The cinematography in this movie is amazing. Like, my professor would always talk about this movie, and I can see why. You like put a tree branch in front of the light, so you wave it so the light is moving on the characters. This movie is so well lit. Oh my gosh. As like a person that has been on set and a person that does production, holy cow, this movie is perfect in terms of the lighting. The dialogue is really good. It's a well-written script. The whole speech about how he blackmails the guy that's trying to fire him so he can get more money, and he like goes through all of it in the most sophomoric way possible, and then he's done with the speech, and then he's like, pass the asparagus. The dialogue is really well done in terms of the idiosyncrasies of the type of people the movie is trying to dissect. It was a strong movie on its own, had its quirks, and it existed in that headspace, and it was fine. But now with the whole Kevin Spacey thing, it makes it really not worth watching for most people. Because in real life, Kevin Spacey did what his character finally decided not to do in this movie. So really, he's playing himself. And that is disgusting. Thank you guys for sticking to the end of this video. I do have 2 other videos, one from the 70s, one from the 80s. And if you want to keep following me through the rest of the year, because we have 2 decades left, 2.5, follow me on Letterboxd. I'll have that link down below. Or just, start now from the 2000s onward, every Best Picture winner. So next week, I'll be watching Gladiator for 2000. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time in the 2000s.